We're live, baby. Let's get some music on. I need to do some setup, but let's find some music. All right, let me see how this sounds. Pull up my chat. Unable to send message. God damn it. There's always something wrong. Let's try this again. All right, I'm back. So this limiter thing, let's just delete that. The audio kind of sounded whack. I should have tested the background music before. Of course I didn't. So we're just going to aim for like this. And if it's too loud, I'll fix it. Of course there's sirens. So basically the point of the stream is to just do some research on Civ 5 for an upcoming video. I've seen other YouTube essay game review people do live streams of their research process, so I thought it'd be fun. And it's helpful for me because then I can look back and see what I was thinking. And I have this tool set up so I can like record timestamps. Actually, let me see if that's working. Because I haven't tried it with streaming. I've only tried it with recording. Oh yeah, I didn't do it right. Hold on. So we have a couple videos lined up that I want to watch. And then we might also do some gameplay depending on how things go. And then maybe some other stuff. Okay, everything seems like it's working. So I'm just going to turn this on. And then we'll just get right into it. This is the first video I want to watch. It's, well, I'm not really sure what it is. It's a behind the scenes video. I'm kind of going into these blind. That's kind of the point. But basically I want to get a sense of like what the teams had in mind during development and yeah, what kind of dynamics they had. So this is, according to the video description, this is a documentary from the special edition DVD made by 2K, community manager. Okay. So let's just see. We're going to watch the propaganda. Lower the Skyrim stuff down. Okay.
Hi, I'm Greg Lobbs, the Civilization 5 community manager.
Oh, I just realized that is a problem. Gotta turn this up. I gotta turn down the music. Like that. It's still too loud. Okay.
Here at 2K Games, bringing you an exclusive behind-the-scenes look at the making of Civilization 5. With over 9 million units sold worldwide, resounding critical acclaim, and multiple awards to its name, Civilization is recognized as one of the greatest strategy franchises of all time. To bring this series into its fifth offering takes the diverse skills of the talented people at Civilization
What was the
is
number?
recognized as one of the greatest claim, and multiple awards to its name. 9 million units sold worldwide, resounding critical acclaim, and multiple awards to its name, Civilization is recognized as one of the greatest strategy franchises of all.
9 million units sold, and that's as of 2010. And this was sent with the special edition. So, when did the special edition come out? Let's see. Civ special edition. No, Civ 5. God. Civ 5 special edition. It was announced July 2010. Okay. Let me open up my note-taking app. So, my mic is in a bad position. Okay. So when they released the special edition in July 2010, they were advertising it as 9 million units sold. And this is across the whole franchise, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I found a forum post from July 9th announcing it. Okay. Let's keep going.
Time. To bring this series into its fifth offering takes the diverse skills of the talented people at Firaxis Games. During this video, we'll explore the history of the Civilization franchise, get a closer look at the team that created the fifth iteration in this revolutionary series, and learn more about what brought Civilization 5 to life.
Perfect. That's what we're looking for.
Civilization was originally created at Microprose in the late 1980s.
It's the guy.
The idea was actually inspired by a couple things. a lot of us were playing SimCity at the time, and we kind of really enjoyed that idea of building something instead of blowing something up. That was kind of a new idea.
Wow. Okay, so already when you compare this to EU4, building something instead of blowing something up. So something I mentioned in the EU4 retrospective was that, like, this idea of being more about growth rather than, I don't know, conquest and violence, is something that Paradox has been adopting from the Civ franchise, or at least, like, it's becoming more and more. I appreciated Gaius Julius Caesar. So yeah, in that video I said that Civ was more like about growth, or at least not destruction, right? And the strategy in the Civ games is more about like building. And here we go. He just said that was on purpose. So that's good to hear. I don't know anything about SimCity, so I'll probably have to research that.
Design, and that was attractive. We'd actually done a game just a little bit before that called Railroad Tycoon, which had a few of the elements of Civilization.
Oh, what? He worked on Railroad Tycoon? So this is just completely different in terms of its like strategy origins than a game like EU4.
There was building, there was kind of a combination of various systems, economic, competition, all those kind of things. And we kind of liked the way that game felt. It had a kind of God aspect to it. It was creative. It was building.
God aspects.
So
interesting. I'll write that down.
Said, you know, what's a bigger topic that we could approach, you know, with these kind of ideas? And civilization kind of came to us. You know, what if you were conquering the entire world?
Wait. He just said he didn't want to just blow something up. Maybe maybe that meant building something instead of blowing something up. Maybe he meant more like, well, I don't know. Conquering the entire world is, at least narratively, it's like he's the guy. All right, let's see what he's saying.
Civilization kind of came to us. You know, what if you were conquering the entire world, building a civilization to stand the test of time? And there are all these cool things we could include: technology, history, military conquest, politics, culture, diplomacy. It just seemed like a very rich topic to approach with this idea of starting small, but then by the end of the game, having gone through this kind of epic journey to create a unique story of your own. So that was kind of the genesis of.
Yeah. Okay. So, couple things here. First of all, it's interesting that building something up. He says building something up in the same sentence as conquest. So, we're supposed to kind of, I guess you're building for your own sake. You're not really, it's not all about cooperation is the point. Which, yeah, we know that. I mean, when I play Civ, I only play domination victories. So that's fine. But it's just interesting. Let me write that down. And then the other thing was at the end there, the idea of like starting small and then becoming like this giant civilization by the end. That's very, not only is that very EU4, but I feel like that's a lot of strategy games kind of focus on that narrative experience where you start out like weak, right? And then you become strong. The big difference is in Civ, obviously, everyone starts out weak, whereas in EU4, like there's, you know, if you pick a weak country, typically your neighbors are stronger than you. So that's interesting. Definitely going to be using this clip.
The original Civilization, which came out in the late 80s. Really had no idea whether it was going to be a success or a failure, or were we kind of on the wrong track. And it actually took a couple months before we started to get some really good feedback from our players. In those days, there was no internet, so actual letters written on paper came to us.
Did he say the late 80s? Let me find out exactly when. When was the first Civ game? First Civilization video game. 1991. So I guess they were working on it. In his mind, it's late 80s because that's when they were developing it. Okay.
And people said, hey, I like this game. It was fun. It's new. I can't stop playing. That was the new thing for us. We started hearing about all these stories about players that couldn't stop, had to play one more turn, and that was.
Ooh, you said the thing. One more turn. So I've watched a lot of these kinds of documentaries, and I noticed that people, when they talk about video games in the late 80s and early 90s, or just honestly all the 90s, there's this idea of like they couldn't stop playing. Like that's a recurring thing that people say, developers and like media. So that's just something
really
that's
an indication
interesting.
that we were kind of onto something with this style of game and this approach. Civilization 2, which came out next, was actually designed by Brian Reynolds. He went off to England for a year. His wife had an opportunity to teach there. He came back essentially with Civilization 2. And there were a lot of really kind of innovative new features there. I think that the modding is the one that we all remember, the ability to kind of create your own scenarios and change the game. And that really gave Civilization 2 a very long life cycle because it was constantly being refreshed by
Brian Reynolds,
the community. And
okay, so now he's talking about Civ 2. Civ 2, Brian Reynolds was the lead designer, is what Wikipedia says. So, that's when they introduced modding. Okay, that's fine. Let's just keep going.
We learned another lesson there. The whole idea of how, if we could, every Civilization player is kind of a wannabe designer in a lot of ways, and a lot of our letters reflected that. It was like, hey Sid, I liked your game Civilization, but here are the 5 things I would change about it. For some reason, Civilization kind of brought out the inner designer in most of our players. So modding really allowed players to experiment with that and do that. Civilization 3.
Okay, before he talks about Civilization 3, let's let me think about this, because like it's clear that the narrative core of Civ, even from like 3.5 minutes of this video, is completely different from something like U4, which, like, if you played it, is not surprising. But there's this idea of like building, and I guess they translated that into modding as well, like modding. Oh, my text is not. Okay, there we go.
Came out after we'd formed Firaxis, and a lot of wild and crazy things had happened with the Civilization franchise, and Call to Power had come out. It was, for a while, we actually never thought we'd do another Civilization game, and then the stars aligned, and we were given the opportunity to do Civilization 3, and that was a fun thing to kind of come back to that after we'd been away for a while. With all the Civ versions, we try and do some new things, add new features, but keep the core intact. And that's always a balancing act that we kind of spend a lot of time discussing, really involve the community in that discussion.
So personally, Civ 3 is probably the oldest one that I have seen gameplay of. Like when you look at Civ 3, it looks like a Civ game, you know? But Civ 1 and 2, they're a little bit, I don't know. They're definitely like a different era. Let's put it like that. It's not like they're not Civ games, but when did Civ 3 come out? What's the date? 2001? Okay. That makes sense. That's why I've seen it. And Civ 2, when is Civ 2? 1996. So it had been about, wow, that it's funny because he said that was such a long time between Civ 2 and 3, but it's literally just 5 years later. Whereas today, that's like a typical, like, sequels that come out within 5 years would probably be considered very quick. So that's fucking funny. All right, let me write that down too.
With Civ 3, for the first time, we had the internet to kind of put us in touch with players. We got a lot of ideas from them, and we actually established a beta testing group that helped us with testing a lot of our ideas. So much more of a community-oriented game. Civilization 4, we turned Soren Johnson loose on Civilization, and he kind of gave his take on it. Some of the emphases on Civilization, and he kind of gave his take.
So he keeps saying we. Who is we in this context? Let me see. Civ 4. Civ 4 is 2005, and Soren Johnson is the guy. Okay. Oh, and he worked on Civ 3 as well. But he was a co-lead designer, allegedly. So I guess he was just like a little more junior when Civ 3 came out. Okay. Someone to think about.
Take on it. Some of the emphases there were multiplayer. Kind of for the first time, we really focused on that from the beginning of the game. With Civ 5, we're building on a lot of those ideas and adding a lot of new ideas. John Schaefer, who's leading that design, kind of threw away a lot of the old paradigms and put in a lot of his own. And so it's kind of an opportunity to try a lot of new things and come up with a fresh take on Civilization.
I was just another player of the game not too long ago. Just like everybody else, I bought the Civ games and...
What happened to this guy? Does he still work with them? No, he went off and made his own company. By the way, how's the ambience? Is it loud enough? Not loud enough? I'm just gonna assume it's loud enough. Oh, he actually joined Paradox in 2017 as a game director and then left. That's crazy. Creative differences, it says. One of those. Let's write that down for sure. So he was a modder for Civ 3 in high school, and then beta tester for Civ 3 and 4. Early in Civ 4, he helped with blah, blah, blah. Designer and programmer on the Civ 4 expansions. And he was the principal gameplay programmer for Civ 5. That's a big deal. So this guy's no joke.
Played them and said, "Oh, this sucks. I wish I could change this." And then, by luck or fate or what have you, I had the opportunity to actually go and take the reins. And
maybe that's what I'm doing. Maybe I'm saying everything sucks. Maybe I'll take the reins. Okay.
Do a lot of things that I wanted to do. And it's been really exciting. It's been very challenging, but very rewarding as well. So it's been a lot of fun.
Another major change in Civilization 5 is a switch from
I want to write that quote down.
large stacks of units to only allowing 1 unit per tile.
Very early on, there were some...
Yeah, so the 1 unit per tile thing, I haven't played Civ 4. So I didn't even know this. And that's something I'm probably going to be talking about. So let's write this down for sure. And let's see what they have to say about this. Because, like, obviously when you compare it to like a lot of strategy games, the 1 unit per tile thing is pretty, let's say rare. Let's say unique.
Changes made to the gameplay that we were excited about. We wanted to make it a hex-based game, and we were going to limit it to 1 unit per tile. And the
the hexes were also a thing. Instead of squares in Civ 4 and all the other games, I'm pretty sure. I think the hex grid was kind of a no-brainer personally, but I haven't done my research on that, so it might be that the hexes feel like a no-brainer because of the success of Civ 5. At the same time, hexes, like, if you think about the benefit of a hex versus a square, squares only have, I guess maybe they can attack diagonally. I haven't played Civ 4. But hexes basically border more hexes than squares border squares, right? Although honestly, if you have a square tile system and you can attack and move diagonally and it's only worth 1 movement point, then it's equivalent to a hex, right? Unless I'm crazy. Is this... Civ 4 tiles. Let's see. And when you try to search for stuff on Civ right now, like the algorithm it needs to show you Civ 6 and Civ 7. It just will not show you anything else. It's really fucking annoying. That's fine though. Maybe that's a hint I shouldn't be making this video. No. Not true. It'll be fine.
The goal for that was, in previous Civ titles, the only square that really mattered was where your city was, and a lot of gameplay would be dictated on where each city was, and we were trying to make every tile very important. Once we switched to hexes, we realized everything could change visually. We could have a much more organic world.
So hexes do a few
Okay, those two things didn't make sense to me. The only square tiles that mattered were the city tiles. And then hexes made the game more graphically good. I don't see the link between those two things, but maybe we're getting there.
different things for us that we're really happy about. First off, they help us in the gameplay side. What that means is there are no diagonals on the corners, which means that there's no advantages in terms of movement and visibility. Anybody who's played a lot of Civ knows that that's kind of the best way to play the game, and it's constantly ingrained in the way that you approach it. So we wanted to remove that bias and kind of make every move equal in a way. Additionally,
so there is some kind of cost to the diagonal movement, or at least there's something going on. I just need to fucking play Civ 4. But yeah, the idea of all the hexes being equal, that makes a lot of sense.
it helps us on the graphics side as well. Because there are no corners, 90-degree angles aren't very nice to look at, so we can make the maps look a lot more organic and free-flowing, and it improves the look and feel of the game as well. So the hexes do a couple really big things for us.
We went for
Yeah, the graphics definitely make sense. Like, I could see that. And I was doing some research on the graphics earlier, and the guy who did the environment art. And I have some notes on the graphics, but I'm curious what they're going to say.
a really realistic style for Civ 5 with the units. Both Mike and I appreciate more realistic type of games and realistic type of art.
Oh, wow. They literally say
5 with the units.
Couple really big things for us.
realistic style.
We went for a really realistic style for Civ 5 with the units. Both Mike and I appreciate more realistic type of games and realistic type of art. Our lead artist, Dorian Newcomb, said we wanted a classical type approach to this game. So we went for more realistic, historically inspired assets. Mike designed a lot of the modern units down here, and I did more of the ancient, medieval, and industrial units. We use color to make the units distinct through the types of metal and the kind of armor they use. For instance, the spearmen would use a bronze color to indicate the kind of armor that they used and the kind of weapons they had, where the later units, the knight has the strong steel, stronger colors. And then each unit will have team color based on whatever civilization you have.
Well, every time we get a unit to do, we go into research mode and we just go through everything that we have, internet, everything else we have, and we just try to pick the more archetypal version of whatever we're in, whether it's the pikeman or the modern tank or something like that.
They go for the archetypal units. That's unsurprising. Like, what you want is like recognizability, right?
That we do a lot of research because people will look at that and a lot of people will know if it's accurate or not.
Yeah, there you go. Accuracy. But accuracy versus archetypal, I don't know that those are the same, but like, whatever. We get the point. He's going for, you know, you see a pikeman, you recognize it's a pikeman. It looks like pikeman in media. Maybe it looks like historical pikeman. Whatever. It's high recognition. I don't think they're saying that, but that's what I'm hearing.
So.
A unit that I really loved that came out great was the battleship. We redesigned the battleship for this game after the USS Iowa. It was a battleship, and we saw one of them in New Jersey, not too far away. The USS New Jersey is on display, and it's an Iowa-class battleship. Trying to get that many guns packed into a small little unit was a great challenge, and Jason Guy did a great job. Mike helped with the concept for that at all. Something interesting, because the ship is so long, we modeled it at real scale, but once we saw it in the game, we realized it was too big for a hex. So we actually had to squish it down 80%. So it's a little squat, but it still looks really good in the game.
Probably the most interesting thing I did was actually do the mech, which appears at the end of the game. It's probably the ultimate land unit that you can get. It's more powerful than anything on the land, and that was.
I wish they would show like a graphic of what they're talking about when they do this, but Civ 5 battleship. Am I even going to be able to pull this up? No. It's showing me the icons. Oh, there we go. That's not Civ 5. And that is a mod. Okay. I don't know. There's nothing. It's not particularly interesting. Let's just keep going.
The first Civilization game to have a mech was Beyond the Sword, and that's when we first introduced that. So I think we wanted to include this one in the game this time. So basically, after building all the tank units and that sort of thing that are in the game, all the armor units, I was tasked out with doing the mech. So that was really like a nice little piece to do. So basically, the concept is basically a walking tank.
Do people who, if you've played Civ 5 in chat and you want to chat, do you guys usually get to the mech? Like, do you? Because I feel like I've probably gotten to that era of using this mech that's on screen, maybe 5 times in like almost 1,000 hours of play.
And we didn't want it to be really deviate from looking like a tank. We didn't want this like Japanimation kind of round thing in there. We wanted something that was blocky and looked like a tank, and also had more weapons than anything on the ground too. We wanted it to look like it had a full arsenal. So,
What I think is cool about the mech is that Mike really drew from real world inspiration, and anything drawn from the real world, the player can relate to more readily.
Huh? What is the real world inspiration for this?
Inspiration and anything drawn.
I'm not like shitting on it. I'm just. I don't know what he's talking about. Let me just write this down.
From the real world, the player can relate to more readily. This cannon on top, it's really inspired by the 30 Mike gun on an Apache gunship, but for ours,
oh, okay, he's explaining.
It's a railgun for our game, and you'll see it in the game, and it's awesome. It destroys everything else. And we also have this bank of Hellfire missiles here. We have smoke launchers. We have different kinds of sensors and eyepieces that people can look at and relate to. There is some hydraulics and heavy metal features.
I was wondering, like, what are these maps? I know he's talking about the hydraulics, but I was looking at, I'm looking on the to the right at these maps of China, India, China. What is it? It says China there on Tibet. Sorry. And then also Japan. What is going on with Japan here? Oh, it's Oda Nobunaga's Japan. Okay, this must be art from the game, but I just think it's funny. It says China right there. You guys see that? Is it? It might be too small. No, it's visible. Wait, let me turn on my cursor so I can point at things because I have it off. This is what I'm. Wait, can you see? Yeah, right here. Okay, that's all. Oops.
This thing feel realistic and really believable. I think Mike did a great job designing something that looks believable.
One big challenge for the artists was creating the realistic.
I definitely think it looks believable and realistic, especially when you don't look closely at it, which is like I've already written a section on the art, and I definitely agree with that.
Leaders that the player would interact with throughout the game.
When we started looking at the experience of a single player playing the game of Civ, and they'd meet a leader, we knew that we wanted that to be an exciting experience. Meeting Ramses should feel awesome, and you should feel like you went back to ancient Egypt. And because we were looking at historical fiction and looking at a lot of films, a lot of times there are great throne room scenes where you're in the presence of that leader, and it feels exotic and foreign and rich.
Exotic and foreign and rich, huh? Well, I get what he's going for. Like, it's definitely cool, especially when you haven't experienced it before. Like, I was replaying Civ 5 recently for the first time in a while, and it was definitely like when I met a civilization, I definitely took note of it more than when I met them in like Civ 6. But maybe that's just because anyway.
And so we had our concept artists
We'll get to that when we get to Civ 6. Okay, we're on Civ 5 here. We're not going to compare.
do what we would call, gunslinger shots, from the mid-thigh up, of meeting these people and being in the presence of their throne. We played around a lot with populating them with people. We were going to have Caesar in a Senate filled with people walking around.
So they played with the idea of having people, and it's funny because when I was playing a recent game, I wrote down that it's interesting how when you meet like Montezuma and you trade with him, there's like a crowd and they'll cheer and boo you. If you propose something that he's not happy about, they'll like boo you. Which is amazing.
As the budget started to come in, we realized maybe having hundreds of people in these scenes wouldn't add a lot and would take away from that leader confronting you. And then we decided to have them speak in their language, so that when you did meet with Caesar.
Yeah, that is interesting. The language, and I'm actually really curious about this. So, because some of the languages aren't spoken anymore. Like obviously Latin is like not spoken, but it's pretty well documented. Like we know what Latin sounds like more or less. But some of the other ones are definitely interpretations, So let's see what he says.
So that when you did meet with Caesar, he'd be in his Senate and he'd be speaking Latin. We would provide a translation so you could actually communicate with him. But we thought that would be cool. That's the whole point of playing Civilization, is to experience history. And what better way than to meet people from...
The point of Civilization is to experience history. Okay.
Lost civilizations and languages that aren't spoken anymore.
Oh yeah, he actually talks about that. Wow. All right. Yeah.
Well, in Civ 4, they didn't speak at all, and we did have sort of a sim-style voices in Civ Rev. For Civ 5,
sim-style voices. What does that mean? Did they speak in like blah blah blue blue kind of thing? Civ 4 had sim style voices.
we just figured that real language would set the tone a little more.
Tone. Okay, it's the realistic tone. They got the real languages. They've got the real graphics. Quote unquote. There's a cohesive tone that they're going for.
In with the game a little more, and it's something I've always wanted to see. I think it's really cool. You really get it. It further gives you that sense of the culture. Just like I think the broader range of music in Civ 5, also the speech, I think just adds to that, sense of culture, We have a studio that we work with in Montreal, a fabulous Wave Generation, that for Civ 4, they recorded all the languages for the units. When you selected them, they would say, like, what'll it be, in their language. So we knew we had this resource that could find any language we could come.
So they outsourced the languages. To someone in Montreal. Okay.
Come up with. So we went to them and basically they found actors for us, and we directed them from here, and it came out great. Most of the in-house music is.
I think it did come out great. I agree with that. Oops. Bonking the mic. Like, there's some things that even I can tell are inaccurate, but like overall, it definitely had the vibes, and I think it was all about the vibes.
Is the leader music, and most of that was written by myself and Jeff. Ian's writing one, and Roland Rizzo is also writing a piece, one of the leaders. Basically, you
know what? Since I'm streaming successfully, I'm gonna try to add a multi-stream to the platform that must not be named. See if it lets me do this. While I'm live. I doubt it. Oh my god, shut up. The creator dashboard. How do I do this? Forgot how to stream. Retrospective research stream. We're playing Civ 5. All right, let me just make sure this is working. It is not working. sure why. But whatever, we'll just keep moving.
We decided that we would use existing themes to base these pieces on. Jeff,
Oh, is he talking about music now?
we would use existing themes. Basically, one of the leaders, basically we decided that we would use existing themes to base these pieces on. Jeff, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Usually our first step is just searching for something.
Sound
finding,
design.
An actual melody from the culture that we're doing the leader music for.
Really? Leader music. Okay. What is leader music? Uses melody from the culture.
And hoping that that melody is famous enough in that culture that if someone from that country heard it, they would instantly think, oh yeah, this is my country, and there'd be that sense of national pride. Some of the countries we just
I was mixing country, nation, and culture together, but that's fine.
had to find fragments like ancient Rome. I think Michael just found these very, very old fragments of melodies, pieced together a piece from that.
It's interesting because I know that when it comes to Rome specifically, like there's very little we know about Roman music in terms of specific melodies. So I don't know, but I don't know. I don't know enough to say anything about that.
So we kind of find the source material and then combine it with the Western orchestra, and it ends up being this combination of Western influence with different cultures. And actually there's a final step for a lot of the music. We're actually going to be recording it in Prague, which is really cool. So
We've written
recording it in what?
And actually there's a final step for a lot
Oh, I should have these on anyway for people. Okay, I'll leave this on for now.
of the music. We're actually going to be recording it in Prague, which is really cool.
In Prague, literally in Prague. What does that mean? Is this is there like a chorus there or something?
We've written probably over 3 hours of original music for leaders in this game. And I think
3 hours for original music. That's a lot. I'm still not clear what the leader music is as opposed to like just the music.
hour and 45 minutes worth of music is actually going to be recorded live with an orchestra and a few pieces with choir.
Civilization V is the first game in the series to use Steamworks. Among other things, this has allowed the developers to make the multiplayer experience better than ever before.
In terms of multiplayer, something that I think people will find really
Yes, multiplayer. That's really what catapulted this game into the popularity that it had. If I had to guess one element that was like the thing. Because, well, yeah, let's just see what they say.
really exciting is our use of Steam, and this is something that's new. Previous Civ games have come out on Steam, but they haven't been integrated with Steam like Civ 5 is. It uses it for matchmaking, for friends, for achievements. There's just
So they had public matchmaking. I don't know if they had public matchmaking before. I'd be curious.
it's all centralized, it's all solid, it's going to be a really good thing for the multiplayer community.
Multiplayer's always been important to Civilization V. I mean, there's just a huge audience out there of people playing constantly, especially in Civilization 4. There's entire communities built around having tournaments, even, what is it now, 4 or 5 years since the release of the last one?
Yeah, 5.
It's huge, and they have these sites that have modded the game.
5 years, wow. That's a long time. 5 years between games. Man, that is such a long time. When did Civ 6 come out again? 9 years ago? Ooh, 9 years. Civ 7 comes out in 2 weeks. For context, the time between Civ 1 and Civ 3 was 10 years. And the time between Civ 6 and Civ 7 was 9 years. Which, yeah, it's not a criticism. Like, that's just how the market is now. But it's just funny.
Game in such a way that all the reporting comes straight into the websites. It's just ongoing, so extremely important.
Modding has been a part of the Civilization series since Civilization 2. For Civ 5, the team was dedicated in making it the most moddable Civ game ever.
Modding is definitely a huge part of Civ, especially with Civ 4. That team did a really excellent job with the features.
So this guy used to be a modder. That's how he got his start. He was a modder, and then he got hired as a programmer. And then he did some programming design work on Civ 4 DLCs, and then lead programmer on Civ 5. So he would know if anyone is trustworthy on modding, at least at this period, it's this guy.
And the priority with Civ 4 was to make as much as possible moddable. We wanted to build on that and keep the power, but also to allow more casual modders who aren't as hardcore into that modding scene to go and make changes as well. So one particular component that we're really excited about is the new World Builder. It's a standalone application that is very easy to use. You can fire it up. You can add and remove things very, very, very.
So I wonder, I don't know the current modding scene, if this World Builder like still is the way that people are using making maps and stuff. So I want to check if that's still supported.
Very quickly. The whole program is super speedy. You can undo and redo things. It's just very easy to use, and it's something that personally I was really excited when I saw how it was coming along.
And more than any other version of Civ, we're focusing on making this the most powerful, elegant, and easy to use tool we possibly can.
This guy made the tool.
So I personally have spent quite a bit of time working on the interface, making sure that it's easy to get into, making sure it's powerful, and most importantly, making sure it's flexible. The World Builder will respond to your mod. It will know what items you have in your mod and will allow you to determine what extra information you want.
Wait, excuse me? What is this? Colonization? Oh, I thought you were the wholesome tools guy. What the hell, man? This is too funny. I gotta screenshot this. Oh, screen went black. Mouse pad that says colonization. So you see, like, people say, oh, sometimes you take things too seriously. Like, it's just a game. It's not glorifying real colonization. Like, sometimes these guys do. I mean, this is not like, I'm not making this shit up. He's got a mouse pad that says colonization. Is this a video game? Is there a game called Colonization? It looks like game art. It is. It is. Okay. Oh, it's Sid Meier's Colonization. Well, that was kind of stupid of me. Well, gotta add that to the list to look at.
And will allow you to determine what extra information you might want to save out with your file. So your maps are as customizable as the game itself.
One of the other tools we have is a tool called Mod Buddy. And it's basically the tool that brings all of the mod files together. It's the interaction between the user and the community hub. It's a way for them to figure out how they're going to set up their scenarios, how they're going to define the gameplay rules, and how they're going to...
So they've mentioned this a couple times. There's been like an emphasis on scenarios. And I don't know if that really ended up being the thing that they thought it would be. I was actually thinking of doing a scenario at the end of this stream, depending on how things go, because I have another video I want to watch. But it's just interesting. Like, I'm curious if people play the scenarios much, and I'll have to find out because I don't know.
To organize all of their map files that they built using the other tools. It's also their direct link to uploading to the in-game community hub. The Civ community has been pretty much vital to the development of this Civ and previous Civs. They are the driving force behind Civ, I would say.
Civ 5 to me is really an acknowledgement of the Civ community. It's something that people have been asking for, have been kind of waiting, when is this coming out? I think it really is a reflection of how strong the community is out there, how many ideas they've generated, how they've kind of inspired us to be creative and try new things with Civilization. So it's really the fact that there's this very active, dynamic, and interactive community out there that kind of inspires us to do new versions of Civilization, because they've given us a lot of great feedback, a lot of love on Civ 4. But now they're kind of ready for the next iteration, and that's what Civ 5 represents.
So I'm really curious what Sid Meier's actual role was on Civ 5, because he's talking about the community, he's talking about all this stuff. is he like an owner of Firaxis? He's a founder. Okay. Him, Jeff Briggs, and Brian Reynolds founded Firaxis. I'll have to research this after the stream, but I'm really wondering what his role was specifically. Because he talks a lot about community. He talks like someone who he's marketing at another level. Like he's marketing the franchise, you know, not just like Civ 5. Like he's talking about Civ 5 in this case, but he's not talking about specific mechanics. He's got like this wider vision. That's what's interesting. He reminds me of Todd Howard talking about like the full Elder Scrolls franchise, you know, the Bethesda vision. That's the kind of, not like the content, but the perspective. It kind of sounds like that. Okay. And that was it. That's the end of the video. So I am going to be right back. I'm going to grab some water and then I'll come back and we'll watch this video, which is very long. And this is a behind the scenes retrospective that they did. I guess Firaxicon used to be a thing. I've never heard of that. Is that still a thing? But we'll see what these guys have to say. They're basically talking through the development process in a more, like a less scripted way. So we'll be going through this one next, but I'll just grab some water. I'll be right back. And let me turn on captions too, so I don't forget. All right, we're back. So let's just jump into this.
So the funny thing is this video probably goes on for 5
A little quiet.
minutes.
Why is this video so much quieter? Hold on.
This is when Audio wanted to get everybody together to record some general combat sounds because we needed a general combat layer whenever anybody would fight.
And we obviously use nothing but the most professional sound operations.
Right. Now, obviously following the combat sounds, we need dying sounds.
I know, but there's sounds of being birds.
And who you hear off the side there is Michael Coran, who was generally the sound designer through much of the Civ 5 series.
What is this? What is happening right now? So, so this is 2015. Okay, the game has been out for 5 years. Wait, is that true? Yeah, 5 years. Civ 5 came out in 2010. And okay, well, whatever. Let's just see. I kind of do recognize these sounds from the game, but I'm not sure if I really recognize them or if it's just like a similar, they just went with something similar.
Success! So again, it goes on and on and on. But that's the kind of thing that you actually see around the office when you're in the middle of development, and it's always amazing when you get an all call for some reason, and it's for something completely strange sometimes. Somebody can walk into your office and say, hey, we need a German accented voice for X, Y, and Z, and you have to actually go back and do it because they got to find just the right voice as a placeholder until you actually get a real actor later. So you always have strange things going on.
Placeholder voices, okay. Okay, hold on.
Especially coming out of audio, when they have to use a lot of placeholder early on. So I wanted to start out just kind of taking a look.
There's no captions on this, so hopefully the auto captions on the stream will help if you want captions, but I can't. It's not, they don't have anything.
Look behind the curtain. We've only got under an hour to kind of go over some odds and ends, so we can't tell you like the complete prehistory as much as we'd like to. It would take a long time, but at least touch on the process to come up with Civ 5, what the team went through. And basically, where this started was sitting at the prototype team. And this is way, way back. This is when the idea was just a concept in like John Schaefer's eye. He had an idea. And at Firaxis, a prototype team starts out very, very basically. And it's small. It's always usually a small team, usually 3-4 people, and that's about it. And the idea of that is...
So the last video we watched was marketing, right? It was like bonus content for people who bought the special edition. This is a post-mortem. Honestly, this is marketing for Civ 6. I don't know if Civ 6 was announced yet, but they're getting the Civ hype train, back up. But this is just a behind the scenes of the development process, not like marketing materials per se.
To keep everything else out of the way. You're not worrying about production processes. You're not worrying about...
Wait, hold on. Let me look up when Civ 6 was announced. May 2016. So yeah, it wasn't... people didn't know that Civ 6 was gonna be coming out. I mean, like, I'm sure they had an idea, but it hadn't been announced. Okay, there you go.
Tools, you're not worrying about tech. You're just taking the path of least resistance. A couple people coming up with some ideas, making some concept art, just basically a way to visualize these ideas for a team. Now, normally in a production environment, me being a producer, there's always these timelines, goals, what's the list, what do we need to really come up with? This has to stay much looser, because with a prototype, you can't necessarily have a strict beginning and an end. As a producer, I'm always going to suggest a beginning and an end, but that's not always the way that it works. So you have to kind of keep things loose, because or else you're not going to have a really great idea percolate out of where that starts. So with timeline and goals, in an ideal world, a prototype team is going to come into this, and they're going to have all the technology they need. They're going to have all the people that they might need, all the team members. I need a concept from here. I need animation from here, and I really want this specific engine to be working over here, and all this cool rendering stuff. But that's not a reality. One of the realities of game development is that
he's talking to, I'm guessing, a general audience about the general process of game development. But I just want to know about Civ 5. I don't want to. Oh, I realize I'm cutting out the top of this. There we go. Sorry about that. Didn't realize. Chopping off the top. And I'm chopping off the left a little bit too. So here you go.
Usually you have this prototype team, you have production teams, but they're usually working on other projects at the time. And you try to line everything up as a producer so that they all fit into these neat slots. So when they have a prototype that's done, they suddenly have people that they can actually start putting into these slots and actually producing the game. So you try to line everything up. That's not at all usually what happens. That, again, that's in an ideal world. You do the best that you can. That's why the team has to stay small at first. So if, let's say, another project is lagging, the prototype team can continue developing. You're not burning through money. And it's also a preference of the designers. Some designers like to have a big, full team around them to really start off. Other ones just want a couple people. It doesn't get in the way of ideas. I don't know if you've ever had a preference for that, Ed, in terms of when you're coming up with something. If you'd rather have something where you have the resources at your fingertips, or you just want to be in a room with 4 guys and forge ahead.
I think the interesting thing is...
Let me just guess that Civ 5 was not developed even at the beginning in a room with 4 guys because of the amount of pressure on the IP. The only 4 guys that had the authority to like even come up with ideas about something like this, that, by the way, I'm just guessing, is probably the founders of Firaxis and like maybe the lead programmer on and lead designer on Civ 4. Because who else is, you know what I mean? You got like this multi-million-dollar franchise IP, but whatever. Let's just see what they say.
We just had a session here where we're sort of brainstorming the prehistory game, and you could kind of see that the more design by committee we got involved in that session, the kind of crazier the ideas were getting pulled in different directions. So I think you do want a small team, you want to also focus on kind of what are your goals for what are you going to do new this time.
Small team, no design by committee. Okay. Interesting. I turned off the chat because chat's dead. Channel's too small. Maybe one day. So, design by committee. I'm just curious who the leads were then. At this early stage, but let's see.
What do you want to try? Where Sid was talking about it in the last session as well about where the challenge is going to be. Some of the things we know how to do and are not going to be very risky, but there are other parts of the project where it's like we're going to try this brand new thing, or we're going to try to invent some new style gameplay that we've never had before. And those are the things you want to focus most tightly on in this early period. I think for Civ 5 it was, will hexes work? Things like that. Will 1 unit per tile work? There were a lot.
So hexes and 1 unit per tile again. That was the concern. That was the big innovation, I guess. Or at least that's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing that the big change was 1 unit per tile, hexes, integration with Steam for multiplayer, and then like modability support, like extra mod support. I'm not hearing a whole lot more than that. I know city states were also new. But didn't sound like those were risky.
A lot of kind of core changes that were flipping the established model on its head. And I think the small team they had, and I joined the team and there were probably 5-6 people on the team. So they had been working for a while, but I got in there early as well. That was sort of ideal for us.
By the way, funny story, I don't know how many here were in the very last session with those concepts. I was sitting over at the side and I had to lean over to Anton because during these...
Where'd they go? Oh, they're coming.
Super early development of Brave New World when we were talking about concepts for what we could do for this next expansion. This is before it was really hammered out and you had great works. The idea of chasing mammoths around the board, prehistory era, had come up, and I'm like, oh my gosh, because Dave and Will weren't even around at the time.
Chasing mammoths? Is this a joke that this must be, he's talking about the, whatever talk happened right before this one. Maybe I can get the rest of the talks from this Firaxicon 2015.
They had no idea that those conversations came up. So it's funny how some of those ideas keep regurgitating themselves when you're talking about what would be great. Maybe no cities. We can follow the mammoths around. So.
And actually,
they wanted to do hunter-gatherer content in the ancient era. That would be pretty interesting. But it kind of would subvert their like core game design because the maps aren't that big where like you know what I mean? Like the scale of the map, if you're running around exploring all of it, you're going to discover, even on a huge map, you're going to discover like a quarter of the map before you even have to settle a city if that's all you're doing in the early game. So anyway.
I remember doing enough research then to try to figure out, like, saber-toothed tigers are really cool.
Yeah.
And they were not mentioned in the last session. I was really disappointed. I was almost going to grab Pete and get that microphone to, wait, you forgot about the saber-toothed tigers. But I've actually done enough research that Göbekli Tepe, which they have found the new archaeological site in Turkey, it's about 8,000 years old. It's 4,000 years before we start civilization. But yet they have archaeological remains and stuff like that. Yeah. And I looked at the time period of the saber-toothed tiger, and the saber-toothed tigers are still barely around then. So I'm like, yes, we have some justification. We could have gotten those saber-toothed tigers into a civilization game.
So they
there are no animals in... Wait, what is going on now?
Turkey...
Oh. Like, animals aren't... They're just resources in the game, right? So I don't know. Maybe they would be like barbarian style, like enemies.
It's about 8,000 years old. It's
We just watched this. YouTube crapped out.
So I'm like, yes, we have some...
a really good job. Of course, we had a large scale because it was an audience, but showing what a typical design meeting's like when you have like 5 people in the room and you're just spitballing ideas for what you think would be a really neat addition to something that's an existing franchise.
Oh, he's talking about Civ 6. We just don't know that he's talking about Civ 6, but he's talking about Civ 6. In his mind.
So what are the primary goals of a prototype stage? There's a couple things that need...
They're probably in the prototype stage. They probably just finished the prototype stage for Civ 6 as they're giving this talk on Civ 5. So can you imagine, like, you got to be careful with what you say. It would be so easy to like slip up.
Need to happen for this team to really have an idea, start the process, and come to fruition. And there's 2 things. One is a vision for the game. They've got to have a vision that they can sell, not only to the director team at Firaxis, to everybody give the thumbs up, Sid goes, I like it, but then again to 2K, because 2K is going to basically say, that sounds great, we're behind it, let's forge ahead and really...
2K is the publisher, correct? Let's fact check. I'm like 90% sure. Published by 2K and Asper. Oh, 2K is the Windows publisher versus Mac and Linux, which is interesting. They got 2 different publishers. Was that a thing back then that people did? Okay, interesting. But he doesn't talk about Asper. And it's funny because when I played Civ 5, I played the Mac version because I had a Mac, and it was one of the only games that could run on a Mac. And so I would always see the Asper logo, but I do remember also the 2K logo. So maybe they just had both in the beginning there.
Start putting all the cogs into place, assembling the team. And the other is just building the prototype itself. So early on, this extremely small team actually gets to work on the vision itself. They're not necessarily worrying about putting a game together yet. They're just basically selling the thing that they want Civ 5 to be like. So they basically have to come up with the big bullet points. What's this about? Hexes versus squares. What kind of things we're going to do? 1 unit per tile. They come up with these big concepts and then
1 unit per tile.
visualize it some way. So
I heard 1 year per tile. It's like, what is this some kind of like metaphor?
people that aren't necessarily playing the game all the time will really get and understand what they're trying to do. So what we're going to show you here is super early. This was way back, the very first visual set of imagery that they created to sell this to the internal director team. It's really primitive, and you're going to see some stuff in there that never quite made it into the game, but a lot of the stuff you'll notice actually came to be. It came to fruition and carried forward into the finished game. Now, one of the funny things is this is normally stuff that's never released.
I am so curious right now. Like my little research brain is going. What is this going to show?
Marketing and PR is not normally fans of us releasing stuff that's super not done. You know what I mean? It's not something that they normally like to do. But this is really cool. But one of the challenges is all the placeholder music and voiceover that we did, which is generally pretty hilarious because it's really bad. We actually had to strip a lot of that out because usually we use placeholder music. It would need to be licensed. There's issues involved. So a lot of this we've replaced it with some pleasant pre-made Civ 5 music.
Okay, so he's basically saying this pitch is accurate minus the music and audio, accurate to the early pitch of Civ 5. And it's funny because he's talking about how the marketing team doesn't want to release unfinished stuff, but they're literally doing this because they know the Civ 6 announcements coming out. Like,
so
it's just interesting.
Take a look at this one.
Okay. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, I mean, I guess this is showing that it's the same, but same, but different. Diagonal advantage. Yeah, so the whole point of hexes is that they're equidistant even when you move diagonally. Because obviously, like in a grid, if you move diagonally, like on a square grid, you move like, what is it, 1.2 times faster? Because it's the square root of 2. So, this plus this is faster than this in raw distance. But in the hex, like this and this are the same distance, right? Okay. So they mentioned this earlier, specifically talking about the graphics side, that like these hexes just feel more organic in their shape. And that's definitely true. I mean, look at these borders. What is that? This one, I don't know. This one is not clicking with me. Simpler. But maybe it points to the simplicity that they're going for. I don't know. Okay. Obstacles, unclear path. True. Clear path. Okay. Like here, it looks like you're cutting across the river at this corner. Sure. So it's interesting, like they said some of this didn't make it into the game, but guess what? These wonders being built on tiles directly made it into Civ 6. And he must have known that when he was saying this. So like I said, this was not a coincidence that they just happened to be releasing this unreleased footage right before Civ 6 got announced. Something I really loved in Civ 5, and interestingly enough, this wonder Statue of Liberty is not on its own tile here, right? But the Eiffel Tower is here. And I was gonna say something I loved in Civ 5 was the feeling of organic growth of your city over time. Like it kind of just spreads. Sometimes it even spreads outside the hex. I think the graphics do, at least. That's something I picked up on as a kid playing this game. Civ 6, despite the fact that you place stuff on tiles, I don't think it has that organic feel for some reason. It feels more gamey, more like arcadey. And I'm not even going to talk about Civ 7. We're just nothing to say. I haven't played it. It's not out yet. When I play it, then I'll comment. Okay, what's going on here? I'm a little confused. So this is one hex with the Arc de Triomphe and the Eiffel Tower. Is this supposed to be the city of Paris, or is this more like... Is this more like a wonder tile? And what is this range? Like, I guess this kind of did make it into the game with the railroads, like the idea of like these roads connecting. I guess this is supposed to be the city here. Sure, whatever. Because you kind of have to remember that, like, since they had never done hexes before, they were pitching like how this would fit in with an art style. So that's what this is. And here we go. Wonders again. Wonders were placed outside of cities, just like in Civ 6.
Something that didn't make it into the game.
Oh, didn't make it into the game, huh? How convenient.
Graphics team looks at you sideways and goes, "You want us to do a skypod?"
One unit per tile is... I did not play Civ 4, but 1 unit per tile must have been such a big change because, like, even comparing it to EU4, let's say, right? Where in EU4, like, one province is like a hex. You can only have one army on a tile if they're not hostile. So if you have like, you can have a neutral and a friendly, or you can have 2 friendlies, or you can have 10 friendlies, but you can only have 2. You can only have 1 if it's hostile. So if 2 armies land on the same hex, they attack each other. But because you can stack friendly armies in EU4, like the entire strategy is completely different. And when I went from Civ 5 to EU4, I was building these tiny little army stacks and spreading them out like this. Because that's what you do in Civ 5, because physically having an army unit on a tile can like prevent their enemy army from moving in. Like even if you know that that unit is weaker, you're an obstacle. Like you could be a very significant obstacle. And And like tactically, that's extremely helpful. So the entire tactics of the game must have completely shifted in Civ 5. And clearly it worked out.
So a couple things that you'll notice from that.
Hold on. I want to see this again. Yeah, so it has like this like chess style where well, it's not really like chess because if you don't kill the unit, right, your unit goes back to the same tile. But a lot of board games, I feel like, have had this this combat style. Okay, that was interesting, especially the part about the wonders. That was clearly put there for Civ 6.
So a couple things that you'll notice from that is at the beginning, how they were doing that whole study of hexes versus squares that now seems like, yeah, okay, that I don't know why you're showing me this. This is so obvious. But we lived in a total squares environment at Firaxis at the time. There were no hexes in any of our game. So they were actually showing this because it was so out of the ordinary to be talking about civilization and hexes. So they had to show what the advantages, what the differences would be when you were actually playing in squares versus hexes. You saw like the wonder build-up. Originally they were going to put it on pedestals and they were going to attach it to the city, things like that, show the build-up. But that
Just like Civ 6.
was not something that eventually they wanted to do. There were issues with having, at the time, a wonder and a hex.
At the time. There were issues at the time.
You destroy it, we're not sure, let's put it in the hex corner so that way it's immortal. You can't touch it, you can't destroy it. And it was a design decision that John eventually made to carry it forward that way. And a lot of the other stuff you saw is just stuff that continued forward into the game, from the views, basically the way that the world looked and felt. That was all carried forward into the finished product. So the next is the prototype itself. What do you do when you don't have the tech to do this? We weren't working in Unreal. We basically have to create tech that we want to use. In Civ 4 we used Gamebryo, so we had an engine to work with. We knew that was something we were going to move away from because we wanted to do something very specific for this. So what does the design team do to create a prototype to basically show 2K that this game is going to be working? And for somebody like John Schaefer, who at the time was an avid modder of Civilization 4, he makes it in Civilization 4. And
oh. Okay. So Civ 5 started as a Civ 4 mod? At least in prototyping? Okay.
This is an example of an early screenshot of the game. Ed actually went way back into his archives and pulled these out, and we included the comment that happened to come across that was along with this screenshot. And it's funny, every Civ game that I've been involved in had this exact bug every single time that we've played.
Can we spot the bug? Because I don't see the bug. Is it this negative horse? No. No idea.
And,
Dennis thanked me for being really bad about deleting old emails. Yes. So there it was, still in my email, years later.
Yep. And you can see it's the same engine, and he eventually pinged the graphics team and said, can we take the squares and just shift every other row over 1/2 of a square? So that was a big...
Oh, true. Okay, so it's... I didn't even realize, but these are hexes. I'm so used to the hexes. These are hexes in Civ 4. Or at least the Civ 4 engine modding of Civ 5, which honestly looks like 80% of the way there.
That was a big first step to just getting these pseudo hexes actually showing up in the game. And this other email was kind of interesting and telling too. And you can actually see some of the old squares off to the right in the desert that shows where that came from. But this is from the writer at the time who was doing a lot of design assistance early on in the prototype, saying this is really strange and it's really cool. Like, they have some superior tech, they tend to attack piecemeal, have responded by building an actual front line of units, which is moving to sweep their cities. What a blast. This was new to Civ. Before, with the Stack of Doom, well, you know, this is just...
Yes. Same in EU4, the Stack of Doom, right? Like, that's the dominant strategy, and the front line, the whole frontline unit thing. I mean, look, you got your units here. You create this wall, especially with ranged units in the back. Tactically, that must have been such a huge. Oh, he's talking about it here. This is the quote. That must have been such a big difference.
Civ history. You move it and you attack. There wasn't a whole lot of tactics involved. So this is the first time we actually got to play with this within the Civilization 4 engine. So many of the challenges.
You know, Civ 6 combines both of these design philosophies with the army system. I just realized, because you can stack, what is it, like 3 units, or maybe it goes up later in the game. But whatever, you can stack units and create armies. So I guess they wanted to bring that back from Civ 4 a little bit.
Challenges that we had was creating an entirely new render. We didn't have the advantage anymore of just falling back on Gamebryo or pulling Unreal off the shelf. We had to create a new engine from scratch because there's a lot of things that we wanted to do that we couldn't really get out of Gamebryo with the Civilization 4 engine. It was we had some very specific needs that we wanted in our new game. And so the graphics team went to work on building one that this is what was going to.
So did they build the full engine or just the renderer?
Get out of game with the shelf. We had to create a new engine from scratch because the
The
graphics
full
team
engine.
went to work
Okay.
on building one that this is what was going to take time, and thus the prototyping within Civilization 4. That game existed in Civilization 4 for quite some time in the development. There was a significant ramp-up time. Obviously, there's a lot of work to be done before this is actually playable. It's not just the graphics layer. It's not just generating the terrain. It's not just creating a whole new language and an engine for the UI. It was all of these things had to be done from scratch.
Yeah, that would have added, like, I don't know, specific amount of time, but just probably like 20 to 30% on the scope of the entire game. Which, if your game takes like 2-3 years to develop, that's like an extra year almost, right?
And with that comes a very slow process of iteration. I'm an instant gratification kind of guy. Anybody on my team, America, I'm looking at you, knows that I'm like, this doesn't look right. How long is it going to take? 3 months. And I'm like, oh, why not tomorrow? Why not next week? And it's just an impatience in me because I know whenever the graphics team makes these big steps, it just makes such a huge difference in the game. You see these amazing things start to happen, but it just takes a lot of time. So as an example of this, we can see on the screenshot on the left where the engine was at its earliest state. When it was first.
Honestly, the mesh of this, like these mountains, it really looks like pretty much there. I don't know if they generate normal maps for these shadows or if it's real lighting. I think it's fake lighting. I think it's normal mapping. Which, if you don't know what a normal map is, it's basically like a texture that just tells the game where to pretend there are shadows. So instead of calculating light by sending down rays, like sending down rays and hitting the mountain, or I guess it would be this way, because the shadow's on that side. You just map a texture on top, and it says shadows over here, and that way you don't have to calculate lighting. And the final product is definitely using normal mapping because it's so efficient. But I think here too, maybe. The only thing that makes me think maybe not is how varied these shadows are. Like this shadow and this shadow are not the same. They're not exactly the same. And the hill, like you see this like curve here, it's different from here. So I don't know. But honestly, this quote unquote super early stage looks pretty close to the final product to me.
Just generating a height map and basically showing, hey, hills and mountains, we've got something rendering on screen, and to where it ended up, we've got a screenshot of Brave New World there, which is basically the same engine that we shipped with in 2010, albeit some minor graphics upgrades. So you can see where that was in December 5th, 2008, and then that slow march of iteration, March 3rd in 2009. And you can see we started to pull in some Civilization 4 resources. We started to get some forests on the map. You can see some rivers drawing around. December 5th, 2008, more general iteration. Again, it's just a slow crawl, but we've got some mountains in the game. June 1st, 2009, which is our first UI coming on board. This is when it was close to being playable. You could play it somewhat at this point, not completely, but the UI system, all those systems are starting to come online. You'll notice the end turn button had found its way up into the upper right-hand corner for some reason. Eventually, obviously you know where it ended up. But it's interesting as we explored all of these systems and just started playing with these systems, the directions that they went.
The mini map is in a different spot.
You know what's crazy is I was looking at this yesterday because I was doing some recording, and this little like banner here is still in Civ 5 today. And it's like, it's not white, it's like this yellowy color. But you see like the framing here that they had? It's almost like, it's almost classical looking, but I don't know what it's supposed to be. But this is still in Civ 5, and it makes it so that the production button, or like the end turn button, doesn't go all the way to the end of the screen. It like cuts off right here. And when I was trying to place like stuff for the stream, like the chat, I was thinking maybe the chat would go here, but it didn't line up with the production button. And then I was like, what the fuck? So it's just funny. It's funny that that is what made it in terms of the UI, because a lot of like everything else is completely different.
Too, right? Got definitely some changes there.
July 4th, 2009, first pass of really early water that we had in the game. And again, you see the UI continues to change. Bottom left unit panel changed again. These things are going to change 100 times between when you start and when you finish, because you can do the best comp in the world for UI, but once you get in the game and you're playing with it, you start to see where things are going wrong or things need to be improved.
So I know the UI changed a lot, but these resource icons look identical. I think it's just low res. But I'm pretty sure those are the final icons. And same with the art for this tech. Ironworking obviously isn't this tech, but this is the aqueducts artwork, isn't it? So clearly the art was pretty far along at this point. But that doesn't mean that it was all integrated into the game itself. And then what's interesting over here on the city panel as well is that they have these circular dials, and I don't know what this one is supposed to represent. Maybe this is production, and this is obviously population. And then the other thing is it says wheat on the ground, like it's written out for whatever reason, but it doesn't say that for like cattle or deer. I'm not sure what's up with that. That must be debug stuff. I don't know.
September 1st, 2009. This is exactly 1 year from release of the game. The next water pass. Water's starting to really come together. We can see the mountains are really come together. There's a little bit of a lack of definition and detail, but that will become.
Okay, I was wrong. This is definitely real lighting. It might be baked. Actually, I don't even think it might be like generated at like when you generate the world and then baked at that stage, but this is not a normal map. So disregard what I was saying earlier.
Coming. November 1st, 2009.
But see, these are definitely normal maps. They probably use a bit of both. Like most games use both.
Fog of War. This is when we had the very first pass of Fog of War. And so you see the light fog and the dark fog. It's just existing as big black circles at this time. And you can see we also have a placeholder unit there. And wheat, which is not done.
Oh, that's why. Okay, it's because the tile graphics for wheat are not done, whereas the tile graphics for cattle, these aren't the final ones, I'm pretty sure, but the placeholder is there. That's why it says wheat on the ground. And same with Barbarian Camp up here, you know.
And wheat, which is not done.
Also, they seem to have changed the city UI already at this point to get rid of those weird circles.
January 21st, 2010. Really started to come together. This is really getting closer and closer to what we were really expecting to see. You can see that
I mean, this looks almost indistinguishable from the final product. Like the ocean looks the same. The mountains are definitely the same. I think the textures on some of these plains are slightly different, but they even have the automatic, like, you know, when you have farms on a tile, it kind of draws these graphics. And then the units look pretty much the same. Yeah, this is pretty much there. You got the barbs, the cities.
Farms still have a little while to go, but the general feel and look of the game is getting closer to where we're eventually starting to end up. And then finally, when we shipped the game, this is where we ended up. So you can see a lot of the final graphics work, the things that really make it shine, are going to happen in those last few months, because you can get to a certain point, but it's the last 20%. When you get 0 to 80%, you're going to see some differences, but the last 20% really makes
This is
a
only
huge difference.
8 months before we shipped, right?
Yeah, 8 months before you shipped, but not just 8 months. There comes a point when you have to stop that graphics work. You're going to get into alpha, and you should be pretty locked down by that point. And they're going to be refining at that point. But the general look, we probably had about 3 more months of iteration to really get the look where we wanted it for between there and there. So it's...
Yeah, that's the final polish stage, which typically it takes a lot of work to do the final polish, and like the difference is huge, though. That's the thing.
It's an exciting process when you actually see this stuff really start to solidify at the end.
It's crazy covering a game that actually has graphics to talk about, because U4, I didn't even talk about it. There was just nothing to say. Like, it's map game. There's no graphics. There's art, obviously, in U4. But it wasn't enough to spend any time on it, kind of thing. Whereas this, I'm probably going to talk about the graphics for at least a few minutes.
So, with that, we also had to take care of making an intro movie. Every Civilization game has an intro movie. Every Civilization
the intro
game
movie,
has some
sure.
sort of montage.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to watch this section on the stream because it's going to take forever. Probably, yeah. Look, it's all this. So maybe we'll skip this. It's mildly interesting what they chose, especially in terms of tone. So maybe let's play it for another like 30 seconds to a minute, and then if it gets too boring, I'll skip past it.
Over and over and over again, because we have a game that is completely wide open, right? So how do you make a story-driven intro movie for a game that's basically played differently by the player every time? And that's always been a challenge. So we've always had these same montages of history, whether it's like in Civ Rev, we had the caveman painting images and it would cut back and forth to all these periods in time. If you look at Warlords, it was just basically a war montage to kind of highlight the different things you were focusing on there. At the beginning of Civ 5, you had the flyovers of a city going to war and a king walking up and getting crowned. And again, there's a lot of these methods that we used many times that, because we couldn't really think of a better way to approach this. So with Civilization 5...
We couldn't think of a better way to approach it? Oh, I think he means... he said Civ 5, but I think he meant Civ 4. Because I didn't know what he was talking about. All right.
We wanted to attack this in a different way. We wanted to put a face on this that really gave it a human face. I just blew through all 3 of these, by the way. So, finding a human element. And the best way we could do that, we thought, is to have a character, one character. And you know, like in Civ 4, they didn't quite have a character at the beginning, but then they had Leonard Nimoy kind of coming in. He was basically the in-game character. Whenever tech quotes came up, he kind of did work on the Dawn of Man. But what if we could take that character right from the beginning? And so we were going through many different pieces of script work, trying to find that character. We had multiple people writing scripts, and they weren't quite working. At the end of some, you'd have funeral pyres where the father would die and the son would burn him, and it evoked images of Star Wars at the end where he's burning Darth Vader. Things weren't quite working. So we finally landed on a place that we thought worked really well. The script worked. We thought we could get this great actor. If we got like Morgan Shepherd, he had a fantastic voice, and we focused more on the voice instead of having a celebrity character this time around. Even though Morgan Shepherd, I thought, as a Star Trek nerd, Morgan Shepherd was a hit for me because he was in all kinds of Star Trek stuff. But his voice was perfect. He had that great raspy voice that we could take all through the game, and we could introduce him as a character at the beginning. But what I want to show you next is a super, super early cut.
Yeah, I don't want to see the early cut of that. At least not on stream. I don't want to torture people.
We obviously saw...
Because who cares about the opening montage. Like I know it sets the tone, and it does. Like, especially when you're a new player. So I'll talk about it in the video, but you're going to watch it now.
Love the work that they did, but it's so much fun actually blocking out the movie. When you're actually looking at it, you can see right away the things that aren't going to work. Like, you're like, that hug is really awkward when you see it there. And even if when it's finally animated, they did the production to be able to go through this process with a house like Digic. Now, the next thing that we had to solve is leader presentation. Each game of Civ has a different way that they present their leaders.
Okay, so this is going back to the leader presentation that they talked about earlier with, in the last video with the whole thing about throne room and blah, blah, blah.
They've done it where
music.
They just reacted. They didn't say anything. The text said it. And then they just make gestures in the background, like, Civilization 3 or Civilization 2.
It's interesting because they went back to this in Civ 5, right? I mean, in Civ 5, do they talk? I mean, Civ 6, sorry. Civ 6 leaders. Do Civ 6 leaders talk? Let me see. I wish there was just like a video. Like a clip of that, but I can't find it. But I'm pretty sure they don't talk in Civ 6. So clearly they didn't like this idea, and I think it's unfortunate because I don't know. Civ 6 made so many choices. I don't want to talk about Civ 6, but Civ 6 made so many choices that like take you out of the game intentionally, and I don't know why they did that. That's all I'm going to say.
They had pre-canned animations. Civ Rev, we had Fraxlish, which exactly half the people in here hate, and the other half think is amusing and funny. That was
okay, so they did have like a Sims-like language.
Thing that was used in Pirates. So what do we do to elevate this? We have to do very realistic scenes. John thought it was very important to have these guys in their environment, gives them extra context, really gives them extra flavor. So what if we do real world languages? This would be cool, it'd be a first for us. So one of the problems that we have with that is finding actors that can do difficult or dead languages, and also the experts needed to actually translate our scripts into something that we can use. We had an excellent external resource that partnered with us to actually go basically all
This is the Montreal guys so maybe he's going to say who they are.
over the globe and find all these difficult languages, find the experts. These experts would translate the scripts. If it was a completely dead language and they...
Nope, he's not going to say who they are. I got to figure that out. Why are they not referencing this team, this company?
couldn't find anybody to speak it, they translate it and put it into phonetics, basically. So if they found somebody that could actually read it, they'd sound like the right person. So one example of this, one of the more difficult ones, was Genghis.
So for some of them, they actually did find speakers. But obviously some of these languages didn't have speakers anymore. So they would just write it in phonetics. Which is interesting because, for example, Aztec, I'm pretty sure there's like phonetic errors in Aztec. Like I don't fucking speak Aztec. Nahuatl. Is that what they call it? Is that the language? But like when you hear them talk, they're saying like Nahuatl. There's like a TL, and I don't know if that's... All right, let's just look it up. How do you pronounce Nahuatl? Here. Oh, you can't. You guys can't see this. Hold on. Oh, it's a fucking... There's a Shen Yun ad. No! All right, one sec. You gotta wait for this ad. Okay.
Panolti, ni Diego iwan Ashkan ni nomachtistica mexicano tlastoli. Wel nechpactia inin tlastoli pampa wel cualtzin. Ni nemi ipan California, ni nechpactia ni amapowa, ni tlaxquilowa, ni mistotia.
Why didn't they get this guy to do Montezuma? Like, this is not at all what Montezuma sounds like in the game, but that's whatever. That's fine.
Khan. Finding an actor that could actually speak the language, is not an easy language to speak, was difficult. And we ended up having to make some compromises to find the person who could do it. So the one that you're used to seeing in game.
I'm sorry, you couldn't get a Mongolian person to speak Mongolian? Like, it doesn't need to be Mongolian from the 12th century. They could just get current Mongolian. Is this... Like, we're not talking about a small company here. I don't know. They could have just sent an email. I don't know. Okay, that's fine.
So Dangerous Sky, you start a game next to Genghis Khan or Montezuma or any of those, you generally know that it's going to be a difficult game because he's eventually going to come riding across your borders. So we had to kind of convey that kind of attitude in our actor. But the only actor we could find was a little bit on the young side.
Did they shift his voice down? Okay, so the issue here was not language. It was tone?
Манай эрдэнсийг ийм шимд өгөхийг манай дарга харах юм бол дургуутсан чи илүү сайн хийх хэрэгтэй. Манай эрдэнсийг ийм шимд өгөхийг манай дарга нар харах юм бол
So with an example like that, we actually had to, when we actually had it hooked up, we had some samples hooked up to Genghis. He didn't sound right because he was this big, sinister, imposing guy. He's got all this armor on and everything, but the voice was coming through just a little too high. He didn't sound quite right. So they actually had to do some post-production work on the voice just to lower it down, get the feel that we wanted. So all of these were challenges.
I don't think that's a challenge. Like, that's pretty standard in voiceover. I mean, I have EQ on my voice right now to make it sound more like what I think my voice sounds like, because microphones are different, you know. Whatever. It's a fun example, I guess.
Challenging. Montezuma was very challenging to find somebody who could actually speak the language and act. So that was one of the really fun parts of the project, is just going through this process, finding all the right people. It's
funny you brought up Montezuma, because that's exactly who I thought of as, like, not the best recording, but the vibe is definitely there on Montezuma, so I can't argue with that.
Always simple though, as this was the first time we've done that. We've got very Western views on what's right and what's not right, our public perception versus what's in game.
What? Wait, what? What is he talking about?
Simple though, as this was the first time we've done that. We've got very Western views on what's right and what's not right, our public perception versus what's in game. Some of the issues that we had with this were some of the leaders didn't sound quite right to the locale that's actually listening to these leaders. And so Empress Wu.
So they asked, I was going to do this for the video, but did they ask actual speakers of the languages, or at least people from the future cultures, let's say? Did they ask them what they thought of the recordings? Is that what he's saying right now? Let's see with Princess Wu what happens.
我是中国的女皇帝武则天，我们断不会向别人寻衅滋事，但在保护自己的切身利益时，绝不手软。
We had a fine script. We had a great actress. Looked good for the body type. Everything sounded good.
Huh?
Technically all correct. But because she was an empress, the local dialect apparently was not quite right. The accent wasn't right. She was speaking more of a, for the time, apparently, a peasant Chinese instead of, or peasant Mandarin versus the way a royal would speak. These are things that we did not know about. There weren't necessarily.
I mean, yeah, that's pretty obvious, like, that would be a thing. But I'm curious, like, what their process was for finding those errors.
Necessarily even things that regular localization team would know about. but people that really studied Empress Wu from that area thought that that was not right. The other one...
Okay, but they're not going to record in ancient Chinese, are they? I really have to listen to the Latin again, because I studied Latin. I don't know if I'll remember enough, but I haven't heard... I've been playing a few Civ games, but I haven't met... is it Trajan? In Civ 5? I don't know. Whoever the Roman leader is in Civ 5.
The other example we have is Sejong of Korea.
조선의 궁궐에 잘 왔소. 나는
I'm playing a game as Sejong right now.
내 백성을 이롭게 하는 많은 업적을 이룩하였다마. 그때도 그러하신가?
This one we thought was perfect. It spoke perfect, it matched the body type, he had a really great performance, but unfortunately Sejong is a legendary character over in Korea, and his voice was not nearly, at least to, again, the locale.
Unfortunately, he's such a legendary character, unfortunately.
As commanding, and just, it should have been deeper, it should have been more bold. Everything that people expect to hear in their mind when they see one of those legendary characters speaking, it wasn't quite right. And even Sejong went as far as a crowdsourced effort to do an entirely new voiceover that went pretty far. I mean, we even had 2K come to us and say, what do you think if we actually put this together for them to actually patch it?
Okay, the captions do work now, so... But I'm guessing you have automatic captioning. Okay, whatever. We'll just turn it off.
But as we know, lip syncing our leaders was a very difficult and time-consuming process. But it's something that we really took forward as we went forward, working with expansions, etc. We really needed to pay more attention to these kind of details that we hadn't had to worry about before. And with that,
okay. It doesn't sound like you said much of anything. Like, yeah, we had to pay attention to details, but did they adjust it? Like, did they adjust the voices when people said that they didn't sound right or not? And I think this might have led to Civ 6 not having the voices, unless I'm misremembering. But I'm like 80% sure Civ 6 doesn't have voices. Does it? Why can't I remember this? I played Civ 6 like 2 months ago. Does Civ 6 have voices? I will confirm that.
I'll hand it over to Ed to do a little study on what's in a name.
And Dennis just segued towards the expansions. I took over as lead designer once we started the DLC and expansions on Civ 5. So first thing I started thinking about was what kind of new systems do we want to have in the game? What's going to be fun and exciting about the gameplay and the expansions versus what we had in the base game? And then all of a sudden, Dennis also came to me and said, what's the name of the expansion? And I was thinking gameplay. I had no idea about name right away. So I gave him a quick response. I knew that the first expansion was going to have religion in it. Religion was going to be really important in the Middle Ages and Renaissance. I also knew that we had planned some scenarios to go with each of the expansions, and that I was going to do a big scenario on the Renaissance period. So my first answer...
Again, with the scenarios, I don't know how successful those ended up being, but I know that I've never played a scenario after maybe my like third playthrough ever back in whatever year, 2011. But I will be playing the scenarios for this video, so.
There was Renaissance, hoping that that would stick for at least a little while and he wouldn't come back the next day asking for a different name. And we actually went with Renaissance probably for 4 or 5 months. That was the plans. Marketing came and met with us, and we were planning to roll that out as the definitive name for the first expansion. We thought it had a positive meaning for the series. There were some things we were doing, like we were taking the combat formula and the 10-point hit point scale that was in the base game and throwing that out and replacing it with a 100-point hit point scale. And so,
it was a 10-point hit point scale back in when it first released? I don't even remember that. So that's interesting.
There was sort of a rebirth in some of the original systems that was going into that expansion. So it seemed to fit. But then we kept having problems. there were people that couldn't spell Renaissance. Does it have one N? Does it have two N's? Does it have one S? How many vowels does it have where? You know,
This is such an American problem to have. Can't spell words in your own language. Sorry.
internally.
Everybody learned to spell Renaissance after those 5 months were up internally.
But we kept realizing other people aren't going to be able to hang with that. So
These people are like programmers. They can't spell Renaissance. Oh my god! You don't have like autocorrect, or even back then there was what is it called? Spell check. Yeah, spell check.
we took another look at it. We thought about, could we simplify it? What's the core essence of what we're doing? And that's obviously how we ended up with Gods and Kings. For
Gods and Kings is such a better name, though. Like, what do you want to purchase with your $10-15 back then? Gods and Kings or Renaissance? Nah, Gods and Kings, right?
the name for the first expansion.
Now, funny.
Plus, it also universalizes it, because Gods and Kings, Renaissance is European, right? Gods and Kings, it fits better with the narrative frame of Civ 5, which is more like global.
Funny thing for this was right around the time when Ed had this idea, Gods and Kings, because it really fit in well with the whole religion aspect of the game that we were introducing. Exodus Gods and Kings was announced, and this worried us. It was going to come out at the same time, but we had already submitted this name for approval, and it went up.
What is Exodus Gods and Kings? Is that another game? Let me do a quick search. Exodus Gods and Kings. Oh, it's a movie with Christian Bale. 2014 biblical epic. Wait, what? 2014. When did Gods and Kings Civ 5 come out? (2012). I guess maybe it was the movie was announced, but not like, okay.
The chain, and they said, well, the name matches up with this movie that's coming out, but Exodus Gods and Kings got delayed, so we were first.
Oh, it was delayed in the end. Okay, that's why it came out in 2014.
And so kept it we shall.
Yep. So it stuck.
Kept it we shall. Kept it we shall.
Then we got to a second expansion. And with a second expansion, we also had to come up with a name. And again, Dennis came with me, and we knew we were going to have a World Congress. We knew that we were going to focus on the modern through the end of the game, so it was going to be post-Renaissance. But it was really going to be focusing on kind of the globalization of the world in the 20th century. And so One World was the first name that we came up with. It seemed to make sense. It didn't seem like there was anything out there that had used that exact name before. Didn't seem, yes, that was the problem. So we actually, I think we were 6 months from releasing Brave New World, and we still had One World as the name. And then I saw some ads on TV for the upcoming Survivor season, and they were also going to call their season Survivor One World. And
Yeah, because who remembers that? That was a different time.
And we started thinking about it, and did we
Vote it
want...
off.
Yeah. Dennis voted that one off the island. So we started going back to the
I guess Survivor was pretty big back then.
drawing board. And the next thing that came to mind was... And you can tell right away there might be some problems with that. It was cool. It had this sort of weird Illuminati kind of
And people went crazy for that one.
connotation with it. We also found there was a World Wrestling Federation kind of connotation to it. So we decided that's probably too dark and too weird.
The wrestling, when we found out there was a wrestling event named after New World Order, that probably sealed the deal right there, that we had to axe that.
So it was at this point that I was starting to really think about the ideology system and figure out how the conflict between communism, fascism, and the democratic people was going to play out. I started thinking about
communism, fascism, and democracy. Okay.
kind of literature. We were putting great works in. So I started thinking about that literature of the early 20th century period. And Huxley's Brave New World came to mind. I threw that out as an idea, and that has stuck. And that's where we ended up with that. So another thing I wanted to talk about, because there's been a very interesting pathway where just some of the work that we've been done has led in the direction we didn't expect at all, is the AI system.
Oh, AI is super interesting because the Civ 5 AI kicked my ass on Prince King difficulty, which is it's like 1 above normal. And it's because I haven't played Civ 5 in like 6 or 7 years, and I've been playing Civ 6 in that time. And I was like, I went back to Civ 5 and I'm like, you know, I'm good at strategy games. Like I'm not going to pay attention basically to the tactics. And I just got obliterated because I put my entire army, you'll see in the final video whenever that comes out, but there was a Civ, I think it was Russia, and Russia's cities were surrounding this empty land in the middle. And so I got open borders with Russia. I put all of my armies into that empty land so that I could attack. But I couldn't reach the capital that way. So I knocked out one of Russia's cities in like literally 3 turns, right? But meanwhile, Russia completely ignored my army, ignored the city I had taken from them, and just rushed my capital and destroyed me because I didn't have an army there to defend it. Because I was thinking like, oh, if I take a city early, it's like U4 or something. My war score, the AI is going to think I'm winning, and I'm going to be able to bully them out of the war. Nope. They actually knew how to play the game on like a relatively normal difficulty. So very curious how they did that, because Civ 6 completely threw that in the trash. Like, I think Civ 6 AI is probably the most notorious strategy AI for being bad, right?
For Civ 5. I came on to Civ 5. I had 2 roles. One was to make sure that the gameplay software that we were building was going to support what John wanted to do. And then I was also going to take the overall leadership for our AI systems. Now, the AI systems on Civ 5 were complex enough that we had 4 different engineers working on various parts of the AI. And the way we made that happen is we broke it up into different components, and you can see that on the right-hand side. But part of that process of figuring out how the AI was going to be put together was sort of figuring out what the difficult spots were going to be, what our challenges were. And I identified 3 or 4 different things here. One is just that Civilization is such a long game. If it takes 20 hours to get all the way towards the end of the game, it's going to be tough to test and balance those systems that just require that much time to be put in to get to it. The other thing is it's not the same game every time you play. That's what makes it so wonderful. The procedurally generated map gives you extreme replayability, gives you that sense of wonder when you're exploring the map early in the game, but it means that the AI is going to react differently to a new situation every time you put it out there on the map, and that's going to make it tough to create an AI that you know exactly how it's going to behave in every situation. We also planned for Civ 5 that we were going to have a lot of unique different play styles for the different Civs, a lot of different bonuses. We started with 20 in the base game. We ended up with 43 once we were finished with Brave New World. So just the different combinations of what if you have a Civ that loves to expand and grab every single space to settle a city like the Iroquois or the Aztecs, and how does that interact with, if you have a map that's full of those Civs, or if you have a map that has them right next to Venice, who's not going to expand beyond the one city. There's just lots.
So something that's like really interesting about Civ and Civ 5 specifically is how the AI, because they have a limited number of Civs, they can program custom AI for each one and make sure that, and like different difficulties for each one, and make sure that each Civ is playing optimally for its own unique bonuses. Because in this game, compared to like EU4, since that I'm gonna just compare it to that over and over. Like in EU4, there's like 1 billion bonuses, and there's like 2,000 countries. You're not gonna write an AI that can take all that into account. I don't think the AI in EU4 takes bonuses into account at all. Because imagine the amount of permutations you'd have to like account for. And it's not just like if this then that, if this then that. I mean, like you could do a more robust system, like more general AI, but it's still like an insane amount of work. Whereas in Civ, at least it's finite. And the bonuses that you get as a Civ in Civ, there's only like 2 or 3, right? Unique bonuses per country that you need to account for, or 2 or 3 unique mechanics. And those 2 or 3 make a huge impact. So like, it's so much easier to program AI for this than for something like EU4. Because there's less complexity, like objectively.
Lots and lots of combinations to think about. And then, even though we had a good plan for segmenting the work and dividing the AI up into the different component subsystems that was going to allow us to work on that independently, how do we ensure that those AI subsystems are going to talk together right, communicate, they're going to be aware of what's going on, they're going to share a common viewpoint of the game world. So the interaction between those subsystems was also a huge challenge. So I'm not going to try to talk about GDC, game developers in depth, how did we solve this software talk here. But what I do want to do...
I kind of wish you would. Is there a GDC about this?
Is talk about one key tool that we used that actually helped us with pretty much all these different problems, and has sort of become a staple of how we develop AI at Firaxis. And so that's our secret sauce. It's not the wonderful UI here. That's not the secret sauce here. But this is our primitive UI that we use to drive what we call our autoplay system. And our autoplay system allows you to fire up a game and have the AI play head-to-head with each other. You can have as many different, set up the map the way you would normally set up a game.
This is like an observer. It's like an observer tool. And I guess you can play the turns without it having to render, which is really great for developing. Because it just does, it like runs every turn, right? But it doesn't have to actually run the game. I mean, it's running the game in logic, but not the game itself, right?
And then you can have this system run, and the game will play itself for as many turns as you want. You can have it stop after 10 turns or 50 turns or 100 turns. And after the autoplay session takes that break, you can have it return as any of the different players in the game, so you can see what the game world looks like from that player's point of view. So kind of from that simple start, we were able to get a lot of analysis of how the AI was balanced, how well it was performing. And one way we do that is by just generating a huge amount of logged data, kind of recording every single decision that the AI makes so we can go back and analyze it. So these are log files. They'll have things that are broken down by different categories of the game: a diplomacy log, a city construction log, an overall economic performance log. And you can actually, if you guys go out there online, you can search for how to turn these things on. You can turn them on and look at them yourself. But
Nice. I'm also curious how difficulty plays into this.
As you'll see from the next slide, they can be a little bit inscrutable.
Okay, a little sidebar here. So remember that scene in The Matrix, and like Neo's in having this kung fu fight, does this tremendous roundhouse kick, and then it cuts back to on the ship, and they're all like staring at the screen with numbers going down, going, "Oh, look what he just did!" And that's everybody in the audience is like, "I don't understand what they're looking at." That's how I feel when I walk into the design office, and they're all poring over this with this screen full of data, and they're going, "Oh my God, look what he just did!"
He's trying to relate to the audience. That's what's happening right now, in case you were wondering. Because I was like, what the hell is he talking about? He's relating to the audience.
Roundhouse kick Sejong. That's exactly how this is. So, yeah.
It's great stuff, though. You can tell, how many times did they build spearmen versus horsemen? How many times did they capture a city, not capture a city when they tried to attack it? This is actually, this little snippet of log here is a summary log that we created. We had such in-depth logging that it took too much time to go through them in detail, and we had to kind of get a quick overview of how militaristic the game world had been, how many battles and wars were fought, and so we ended up rolling up data into a higher level macro log that condensed the information and gave us a quick summary of when people went to war, when people went to peace, and so forth. And just as an example of how we use that type of AI analysis is I used a bunch of AI autoplay runs to help out the Beyond Earth team when they were putting that game together. And you can see examples of that on this screen here. Just a simple little...
Remember Beyond Earth? I don't. I didn't play it. Someone played it, though. Does Beyond Earth have positive reviews on Steam? Let's see. Civilization Beyond Earth. No, it's mixed. 60% positive. Yeah. Yeah.
Little Excel chart I put together as a capsule summary of all those different runs. But what I was trying to look for was how active were the AIs in going to war? How often were they doing friendly things like offering pacts of cooperation? There's a little section there highlighted in red, and that was showing that in the course of a Beyond Earth game, condemnations, which is the same.
Oh, see, look at this. The difficulty is listed. So they were planning for that. Okay.
Thing as a denunciation in Civ 5 pretty much. Those were happening between 50 and 100 times per game. It was kind of way out of control in that particular build. So I did another tuning pass, changed the condemnation levels to bring them down into a more reasonable zone, and then we did three more runs after that, and the numbers looked a lot better. So that's just sort of an example of how...
It's interesting because, like, how do you decide how many denunciations there should be?
An autoplay system helped us develop Civ 5. So why am I talking this much about the autoplay system in the middle of kind of a funny recap of Civ 5 stories? Well, we actually didn't leave off the autoplay system here. It's sort of come back and emerged as sort of a new thing within the Civ community. And that's kind of our summary here. They're a useful tool, but can they actually be a way to have more fun with Civ 5 as well? And this was very surprising to us, but the Civ community, I don't know if anyone...
What is this? Battle Royale?
Anyone here is involved with this, but if so, feel free to stand up and take credit for it. But what's happened is, specifically the Civ Reddit community, which has just developed over the last 3-4 years, really, and blossomed and now is a vibrant part of our fan base, decided that they were going to put together a couple Earth maps and try to battle Civs out, starting from their respective real-world historic...
Oh, I see. It's like one of those like simulation things where you bet on a like a tournament. You know, you say, oh, the Mongols are going to win, and then they all compete.
Start locations and see who the winner would be. And it took a couple tries to get this right. The first couple games got snagged by technical problems and so forth. They were trying to have as many as 60 civilizations on the map at the same time. We at Firaxis only support 22, so they were way past the normal limits. But they've stuck with it, and now this is their third iteration of it. It's Civilization V Battle Royale Mark II. And we got a couple screens here showing what they've done with it. This is what a game world might look like. This is
pretty cool. But players aren't playing this, right? This is also, why is Boston in Chicago? Baltimore. Salt Lake City. What is happening? New York. Oh no.
Is the Americans in blue fighting the Canadians who are in red. You notice that the Canadians are doing well here. They got a big chunk in the Midwest. There's a Mexican army coming up along the Gulf of Mexico. And then I believe it's the Sioux who are up in the Pacific Northwest. All the different conflicts between the nations get named. So you can see here that it is the Bison War that is going on between the Sioux and the Mexicans right now.
It always amazes me how closely this follows real life.
You can see.
Really?
Boston on the Great.
He's working the crowd, though. I mean, the crowd likes it. That's what's crazy.
Great Lakes, and New York settled right where Orlando is right now. So lots of fun, but they're just fascinating to watch. And not only do they have screenshots like this, but
oh, it's all screenshots. It's not. There's no video. Oh, Twitch.
they will publish twice a week episodic content of what's happened. They get guest members of the Civilization community that come on and do the little funny recaps and kind of play-by-play of what's going on. So this particular second Battle Royale is up to part 16. And you can go and you can review any of those. They're all available in they have a dedicated Civ Battle Royale Reddit forum. And then they have animated world maps showing the...
Yeah, I don't know. I guess this is just like community, just enjoying the community, being the community kind of thing. Look at this map. Oh, this must be Poland. Yeah. This is in red here because Russia's yellow, right?
Extent of all the different empires. This will animate as you play through and kind of review the entire state of the game, which is now up to turn 179. And yes, they even have newspapers. So
that's crazy. Man, some of this, like, I guess this was 2010s, but the internet was such a wholesome place sometimes. But, well, okay, that's not true. Whatever.
This is the European. This is the latest edition, just came out. All the latest conflicts in Europe. We have, embedded pictures from the game world as well as articles there. And the community has even gone so far as there's a World Congress where they're discussing what's going on with each of the different civilizations. There's some type of stock exchange. I haven't figured it out yet, but there's some way where each of the countries are valued in relation to each other. And you can actually go and support the different civilizations in the game and make charitable donations towards them. And what happens is if they are knocked out, they find a good cause, some type of charitable organization within the country that has just been eliminated from the game.
Wow, that's kind of cute.
And take all that money and donate it there. So Civ Autoplay's doing good for the world. Who would have thought, but that's what's happening. Okay, and we've got one more interesting autoplay story that kind of led us to also in a different direction. And sort of as I've explained here, coming in every day, part of my regular routine was get the latest software, get the build made, and go ahead and run a couple autoplays to make sure nothing is crashing, or else other people will be running autoplays and they'll bring me crash reports. And I did have just a case like that on Civ 5. where I came in the morning and a crash during the autoplay was reported to me. So I started looking at it, and the interesting thing was that there was a crash building a palace. Okay, and if you've played Civ 5, you know you can't build a palace in Civ 5. It's already there. You know, when you start out, boom, you've got a capital city, the palace is there. So how actually can you build a palace in Civ 5? So I thought this was most peculiar. And I started looking into it. What's going wrong? Where's the bug in our system where all of a sudden someone's building a palace and that's crashing? Well, the problem was that it wasn't a human player. It wasn't even a regular AI Civ that was building a palace. It was the barbarian player.
That's crazy. Is this where they got the idea for the Civ 6 barbarians turning into real players? How is this possible? Or, I don't know. Let's hear.
And the code that we put in for Civ 5 so that barbarians are allowed to ransack your city and take a lot of gold from it, but never actually capture the city, that code was not working right. And the bug was that they were letting the barbarians take ownership of that city. And the barbarians, being very smart players, say, everybody else has got a palace. I want one too.
That's pretty funny.
So they started building it. So I was thinking, actually, this is pretty brilliant. This is actually a really smart barbarian. And I hated to fix the bug, but, you know.
That's what's cool about these games. I've done a little bit of like indie game development. You always find crazy shit going on when you have like a very systems-based game. So there's always some crazy stuff happening.
I had to do it. But it sort of left a sort of kernel of an idea with me that, you know, maybe this was cool, maybe this was fun.
Oh my God, this is where they got the idea to let barbarians take over cities and have their own civilizations in Civ 6. Let me write that down for the Civ 6 video, whenever that comes out.
Maybe we should let barbarians have a bigger role in the Civ 5 universe. And, you know, so the barbarians took over a city. They thought a palace might be cool. They built one. So I started reading for the Gods and Kings expansion pack a bunch of history of the civs that we might put in. I got to a book, and this was the cover of the book. It's a picture of Attila. He has recently moved into somebody else's palace and taken over it. This is a picture from an art museum in Budapest. And to me, it just reminded me of this whole autoplay scenario. This was the barbarians. They have just taken over a city, and they're quickly putting up a palace for Attila.
Attila is the barbarians, huh? And it's interesting because he's talking about which civs he wants to put in Civ 5 Gods and Kings. And they put Attila in Civ 5 Gods and Kings. So yeah, whenever I get to the discussion of barbarians, it's going to be very interesting to, we're going to try to dissect like who are the barbarians that Civ is talking about. Because he says right here, Attila and the Huns are the barbarians, right? But they're a Civ. They're literally a Civ in that game in Gods and Kings. So what qualifies there? It's just interesting.
And so I thought, that's kind of fun. Let's go ahead and Attila's never been in the game before. He's one of the kind of most feared, they called him the Scourge of God, one of the most feared leaders in the classical world. Maybe we should go ahead and this time, you know, put him in as a Civ leader. And so you can kind of look at this artwork and then sort of see where we ended up with for Attila. And there's sort of the same idea there. He's recently moved into his throne room. He looks like he's just came in from horse riding, but he's occupying the throne and happy there. And
he doesn't look happy.
Well, maybe not, but.
So, they're saying this idea led to adding in Attila the Hun as a civ. However, they took it to the next level in Civ 6, so clearly that was already something that they had in mind.
Even what he's saying, be wary of crossing me, lest your wealth end up at my feet. So, you know, he's got the right attitude for the barbarian recently moved into the palace, I thought. So we're going to put the Huns in the game. We start editing the XML to get them in the game. I start looking at all the different things you have to put in to add a new civilization in. And there was a problem. I got to trying to populate the city name list for the Huns. And I said, well, let me grab my book on the Huns and figure out what cities they founded. And they didn't found any cities. None. So we looked at it, and they took over this Roman city.
They didn't found any cities? What? But civilization is about founding cities. How could you? I mean, you must not be civilized.
They took over this other Roman city. They took over a third Roman city. They took over a Byzantine city. They just conquered cities. They didn't actually take any themselves. So what are we going to do? So we have a couple different ideas. Maybe we use the different tribes of Huns when they were out on the steppes and they were broken up into different tribes. We could kind of come together to come up with enough names to make up a city list. Didn't sound super interesting. We could name them after their different leaders. After Attila came through and he took over a lot of territory, and the empire fell apart a little bit after that, but it stuck around long enough somewhere over in...
You know, whatever. It's fine. It's not like Rome founded that many cities. I guess they did have their little trade cities, the colonial cities. Whatever. It's fine. Every country that has grown large has done it by taking over existing cities. So I think the issue here is more about time frame. Like the Huns, one, are nomadic, obviously. They're framing this as anyway. But like the other thing is the time frame. The Huns, when we say the Huns, it sounds like a civilization, but this was like one group that splintered off from Central Asia into Europe, right? During the late Roman Empire. So it's not in their favor to be compared to like 1,000-year-old civilization. If you had all of the nomadic groups of Central Asia under one civilization, which is kind of what the Mongols are supposed to be, then it's more fair because they did a lot. And they didn't just burn stuff down. They actually did build things. Maybe not cities, but anyway. It's just a common thing where like there's like this expectation that's not consistent across the world that I notice when in like Western portrayals of other cultures in video games. It's just limited to that.
Bulgaria or Hungary we could probably come up with a list of 10 or 12 chieftains and use their names as cities. But none of those seemed really very exciting. And so we decided maybe the best idea, in history they took the cities from other people, maybe they should take the city names from other people as well. So this is a Civ 5 screenshot, and you can see that the great Hunnish city of Spokane is at the north part of the map. They've stolen that one from the Americans. And the great
I haven't played Attila in a while, but are we saying that they stole the name or the city, like they conquered the city?
Hunnish city of Winchester is to the southwest of that. That was stolen from the English. And then there's I think it's just the city, because these are not capital names, right? These two at least, and yeah, none of these. So they just
Okay, they just take the city names from all right.
Zapalapa, which they stole from the Aztecs, and a bunch of other examples. I think there's a Korean example and Persian city as well in there. So this actually became kind of fun from a gameplay point of view, because normally you're trying to figure out early in the game of Civ who the other players in the map are, who you're going to have to face. You know, are there those powers that are going to sweep over the other continent? And here you actually, as you build your settlers and found your cities, you get little kernel snippets of intelligence about the other players in the game. So as soon as we tried this out, we decided it was fun. It was actually the way the code base worked right out of the box. It was already set up that if it ran out of city names on a list, it would just grab one from another player. So I didn't even have to write any special code to have it work like this. So it was win-win situation, and we
Wow, that's funny actually.
went with it. Back to Dennis.
All right. I just want to touch on a couple things as we go through. There's some just funny clips that we dug up to kind of wrap things up, and a couple places where things didn't quite go as planned.
Be wary, my son.
This is another early storyboard in progress for the Gods and Kings intro. The audio will be mismatched. But there's something specific I wanted to show you in the middle of this.
An empire. As clashing ambitions spurred the appetite of armies, plow and sickle gave way
What am I watching?
to sword and shield. Consumed by war, mankind found little solace, rushing to action on impulse without forethought. Religious devotion brought hope to some. But even then, many were consumed by zealotry, filling them with suspicion and...
Okay, let's talk about this scene just for a second. So you sometimes get in tunnel vision when you're working on a game in terms of what...
Is he going to talk about player sensitivity? Is that where we're going with this? With someone being burned at the stake? In a game where you could slaughter barbarians and genocide entire cities? I'm not even criticizing that. I'm just like, was this too far, but everything else was fine? Is that what we're saying? Let's hear.
What's historically accurate would be cool. And when we were early in the process, and this isn't super early, you can see this is the third iteration of the blockout that we were working on with the house. This was Plastic Wax that did our intro movie for this. When 2K came knocking on our email door going, guys, we can't show burning humans alive.
That was too far. To be fair, yeah, there's a difference between showing this versus like when I click raise on a Civ's capital and I hear the screams of and the sound of fire, like, I don't see it. Just hear the screams. To be honest, this is less disturbing to me, even if it was like correctly animated or whatever. This would be less disturbing than burning those cities and hearing the screams, which I've been burning a lot of cities in my current game, so I have been thinking about this. But again, it's like the same as U4. It's if we just abstract away the ideas that we're representing, it doesn't matter how violent they are. It's cool as long as you don't see it, you know? As long as it's a number on a spreadsheet or like as long as it's not a member of the audience, then it's fine.
And we were like, it actually happened, why not? We can add more flames, we can consume it. We don't have to show it. And it's like, no, it's E10. So your 10-year-old's gonna be watching this and it might be a little disturbing.
Oh, it's E10. How come I can burn down cities if it's E10? If you don't know what E10 is, it's the ESRB rating. So it's like the child age rating for the game.
Disturbing. So we're like, okay. So we went through back and forth probably 4 times, down to where we only showed maybe a wisp of cloth and just the feet. And we were like, can we show the feet? And then they said no, because then you're going to see the feet wiggling and the flames are going to be coming up. And it just is a horrible idea. And eventually we had to land on, you did actually see the feet briefly, but then they were off camera and the flames roared up. But it's one of those things where sometimes these situations happen when if you're anybody not working on it, they're like, that's absurd. How could you possibly think that's okay? And at the time, you're like, it's completely normal. We're burning a witch. It's fine.
Yeah, I get what he's saying. Like, you know, if you're working on a game for years, I get tunnel vision even when I'm playing these games, let alone making them. So. Oh my God, what is happening? Oh no.
That's nightmare stuff. And sometimes we come in with the first thing that we normally do when we come in the morning is check the auto build. We normally download the auto build.
That's freaky.
See what might have broke from the day before. Just generally see if everything's okay. This is one of those mornings where everything broke.
All right, this is just a bug compilation now.
Except Fraps work that
Right.
way.
Now pay attention to the archers on the elephants over to the right.
I completely missed that.
The archers on the elephants over to the right.
Oh, it bonked them on the head. It's kind of crazy.
That's unfortunate. Oh my God.
Oh, that's freaky.
Timmy's dead. They're killing us. Oh God. No.
This was peak humor on the internet in 2014, so.
This one's my favorite. Hold on, it gets better. Oh my God, it's saying.
Yeah.
All these videos are basically used that get fired off to some team member and are saying something's not working here, and then you look at them like now 5 years later and it's like, wow, that's pretty funny.
Don't delete your email.
Why did this crack people up the most? What the hell? There's nothing happening.
So,
Horse.
with that, we only have time for just a handful of questions. So I'll have Pete run around if anybody does have any questions.
Anybody? We got a question in the back here, real quick.
Yeah, so a question on how the AI process works when you're developing
Yes,
it.
please.
Is it a lot of getting basically really good players and trying to understand what basic good strategies are? Or is there a lot
I
of
doubt
just
it.
trying lots of random different things and seeing what floats to the top?
I think it's more the former. And one
Really?
tool that we have that's a very useful tool is we have a secret but not so secret external group of testers. A lot of them are really, really strong players of the series. We have some, a wide range of ability levels there as well because we want to test the game from as many different angles as possible. But those people are very, very good at identifying, kind of core strategies that are going to win, where AI may be weak. And one of the things that we did with that external group is we would actually ask them for what we considered AI bloopers. So anytime the AI was just obviously making
Oh, I'll provide some of those.
a poor decision or was obviously taking a strategic path that wasn't going to end up being a dead end, we'd have those people.
This process sounds pretty robust, so I don't know what the hell went wrong with Civ 6. But I guess we'll get to that when we get to it.
Kind of either send us games where they could demonstrate that or just describe it to us. And those were always great areas for us to shore up the AI. So I think the former approach is definitely a path that we take. And in terms of just trying a bunch of different things, we sort of got the trying a bunch of different things naturally from the AI autoplay system. We have a lot of different, we had, without going into a lot of technical detail, but we had a flavor system that drive the AI in different directions. And so based on the fact that the flavor settings were wildly different for some of our civilizations, when we ran a lot of autoplays, we would get a lot of different outcomes. And we could see—
Is this like the Gandhi thing, where Gandhi loves to nuke people because of the overflow?
things like, for instance, I think it's still true in Civ 5 that Alexander plays one of the very strongest games of any of your AI opponents because he's really, really good at getting city-states allied to his side and building this huge coalition of city-states that is tough to dislodge. And we definitely saw that kind of behavior in the autoplay games.
Okay. That's historical or whatever. That's narratively cohesive. It's like, do you want your AI to be equal or do you want them to be interesting? That's kind of the problem.
Okay, when playing at the deity level against the AI, any suggestions? I've got 2,000 hours in on Civ 5 already, and deity is almost impossible. I've beaten it on Immortal a few times. I've beaten it on deity once.
Okay, well, if you're bound and determined to beat deity, I think probably the best tip there is there are a lot of Let's Play videos. Mad Jin, who's one of our external testers.
Damn, he said ask someone else. He said ask the pros. This guy doesn't play on deity.
Who's here
Neither do I.
at Firaxicon with us today.
I'm hoping to beat one deity game for this retrospective at least, but I don't know if that's gonna be feasible, but we'll see. I'll try.
Has posted a bunch of those, but he's not the only one that authors those. And they have like specific tips, or you can watch them play versus deity. And I think that's probably the best way to make sure you beat that. I actually myself have never beaten deity. I haven't gone
Called it.
on a huge series of runs to try to beat it. I like to be able to play sort of without trying to exploit the AI all the time. So I've only beaten Immortal myself.
Oh. The only reason you could beat deity is with exploits, huh? Is that what you're saying?
It's XCOM that I have this morbid fascination with making sure I win on Iron Man, but with Civ 5, I kind of step back and try to play it a little bit more like the designer wants to play it.
Ed and Dennis, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, that was good. Mostly that was useful. How long have we been streaming? About 3 hours. Okay. So that was all the recording I had to look at. Let me turn this off. So I might just end the stream here because I don't think I want to start a game right now since we're at 3 hours. I thought this would take more like 2 hours. But I'll definitely be doing more of these research streams. So if you guys want to see more process, and the next research stream I do, I'll probably be doing gameplay, or maybe like one video and gameplay, something like that. So I think that's it. All right. Bye, people.